a time like this when there's this constant call to create more spaces and create more opportunities to have these discussions and to keep this conversation going for our collective growth. So the way we're going to move through this is there's just a series of comments or questions that sometimes come to our minds when these kinds of things happen, and someone's going to keep us moving on this conversation by changing slides every 5 minutes, and we'll know then that it's time to shift the discussion a little bit and read what's on the slide and engage in a conversation about it. So you can go ahead and get that started. So the first question here is, well, the first prompt: have you ever been pulled over or stopped by police and wondered, is my race a factor in why I was stopped, or will it be a factor in how things progress? First of all, I think maybe all of us, in this panel can answer this question. For me, the answer is yes, a number of times, and I can't think of a single time where I didn't wonder those things.
Should we just chime in then?
Yep.
I have been pulled over, stopped multiple times. They're never really a question, only because the questions that I have been asked, the people around me that don't look like me are not asked. So getting pulled over as I turn into my family's neighborhood. Why are you here? You don't really look like you belong here. That's why you got pulled over. It's just like you kind of looked suspicious, like you didn't know where you were turning into, and then proceeded to follow me home after I provided my ID that had the address that I'm sure listed him in the neighborhood that we were currently in. So when moments like that happen, it's hard to assume anything else, because why are you following me home if you had my address right there?
I'm going to give a yes to that as well. It just reminds me of like early on when I very, 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 very first started driving. At this point, almost 20 years ago, it's because your parents have the talk with you for multiple reasons, but I think the one about driving was extremely serious because it was a situation where they legitimately could do nothing to help if something went sideways. I mean, so it's so every time I get pulled over, my parents, all their words just ring through my head. Like even now, here I am, as a grown man, I absolutely think about those things, and it's especially just extremely nervous. I mean, because I've had cops look at me, why are you so nervous? I look at them like, do you not know? And so, you do everything you can. I mean, but when a cop walks up to the car with his hand on his gun, I mean, you've got no choice but to feel some kind of anxiety. Yeah.
Rowena or Raisha? You're mute, Rowena.
Sorry about that. No, I haven't. When I've been pulled over, I've been pulled over for a reason. I mean, most of the time, like it hasn't happened a lot at all, but I knew I was speeding. So I was just like, okay, I knew that was the reason. I haven't really had any negative interactions with police officers when I've been pulled over, but I do feel, as I've seen and heard stories of other people of color and their interactions with police officers and how they were treated and so on. I just noticed that, like, the last time I was pulled over for speeding, I did feel a little bit nervous. And I noticed prior to that, like, I really never felt that way because I never really had any negative interactions. And it's like, and again, I can count how many times I've been pulled over, and it really hasn't been that much.
Okay, maybe we'll give Raisha a chance to answer before we shift topics. But you can switch sides if it was time. Raisha, how about you? Have you ever been stopped and wondered those two things? Either of those things?
Yeah, it comes from what we're seeing in the news. We possibly have all had some interactions or were being introduced to the good cops that come to the school, or to, seeing some fair or something like that. So that might give a certain perspective. But when we see what's going on in the news, and you can't help but be on edge just when you get pulled over. It's like, oh man, I rolled through that stop sign, but you're just on edge. And I don't know if that's the case for everyone that is not Black or just another person of color. Is just that different type of feeling when you're on edge, where could this escalate into something else where I'm not going to make it home, or just get off, or just make it home with just a ticket and live to fight it another day. But nobody should really be on edge like that for their life when they get stopped. So it's a different type of feeling when you see what's going on in the news constantly.
Yeah, for me, definitely it's the news, it's what friends say, it's what you experience, what I experienced in my life. I grew up in a predominantly Black environment. And a lot of the spaces, I grew up in predominantly Black environments that were um, middle and upper middle class. I also grew up in predominantly Black environments that were, the first part of my childhood was um, in much lower class neighborhoods, and across the board, the interactions with police officers were rarely positive. So moving on, being compelled to do so, just to keep things moving forward. Yeah, definitely. When I saw this video, it's just like, why did the officer grab this man's hair? Why? Why was that a go-to?
I think the very first thing that comes to mind is disrespect, right? I mean, because one thing that you absolutely know, um, you know, about Black folk in hair is that they absolutely take a lot of pride in their hair. Now you could make the argument, oh well, how could he know that? Well, how could you not, right? I mean, like people watch sports, right? And we know that a bunch of Black folk play in the NBA, NFL, whatever, right? And they tend to have long hair, and that it takes a lot of upkeep. Why else would you do it, right? I mean, so you know, he sees that. I mean, he knows like, okay, well, what's the best way for me to try to rile this guy up? Like, imagine he got a good handful and yanked it. It would have been an automatic physical reaction, because that's what happens when you feel that kind of pain, right? And someone grabs your hair like that, and then that gives them all of the it gives them that green light that they need for things to escalate physically. Whether or not that was his 100% plan, bam, bam, bam. We're not in this man's head. We don't know. But one thing that I would say with some relative certainty is that he was trying to disrespect him. Now, whether or not he wanted to turn physical, who knows? But
Yeah,
that's not something that you do when you have an overwhelming amount of respect for somebody.
I also think, it's like his arm was there, his leg was there, those things were accessible, his shirt was there. His hair, though, was also a part of what made him Black. So it just makes me wonder if, in part, the reason why he's pulled over and treated a certain way is because he's Black, and his hair is, in a sense, connected to that Blackness. Um, you know, Maybe the officer almost couldn't even resist themselves. Sorry. Um, any thoughts from Alexis, Rowena, Raisha?
People grab my hair all the time. So, I mean, an officer doing it, whether it be out of his lack of respect or not even acknowledging that person as someone that is deserving of respect. So it never even came to his head that grabbing his hair or something would be something that is like grabbing his identity, actually taking away that level of respect for him, because he didn't have it there in the first place. So I think that once you start treating people kind of like cattle, this is how I pick up my dog if she wasn't listening. I'd grab her by the back of the neck so I can make sure she's okay. But yeah, you got to follow to what I'm doing. That's what I'm seeing here. It's like you're just seeing how the officer was viewing this man from the beginning, in my opinion. He saw him as cattle, as property, or something that could be manhandled in such a way. And I mean, I would never grab anyone's hair, so I can't even fathom to jump in the mindset of disrespecting someone and grabbing them in such a personal spot.
I want to ask you, you say people grab your hair all the time. How does that make you feel? I still want to hear from the other folks, but like I can't help but ask that question.
I am a very outgoing individual if you have not had a chance to work with me. So I am not afraid to let someone know that it's inappropriate to grab my hair. My hair changes all the time. It changes colors, it changes styles, it changes lengths. I like to have fun with my hair, and I understand that that can be intriguing to someone. However, if we do not have that relationship, it's usually the stranger that approaches me and grabs my hair, where it's like, okay, you don't see me as someone that's on the same level as you, because if I came up to you and grabbed your hair, I know that there would be an issue. I'm just supposed to accept the fact that I get to get treated as a zoo exhibit sometimes, I guess.
Feel free to jump in, Raisha, Rowena, if you have thoughts.
Well, it's just along the same lines. Where in what, I don't know if it's the training or if it, if it's instance by instance, pulling over, how does it escalate to this? It's, there are always going to be difficult people. That's something that has been an issue where they don't seem to, there's been an issue of learning how to de-escalate a situation when there's someone that they feel is being difficult, and for the default to be getting physical right away, whether if it's, without having an alternative is just so problematic and disturbing to see that the cop would reach into a personal vehicle and grabbing on someone's hair. It's takes it to another level, and I think he's doing the right thing. I heard that he was taking legal action against the Redlands department, and so it'll go from there. But I think cops really need to see this needs to be videoed much more often, and we all need to be able to see it, because it's not a lie, it's not a urban tale. It happens every day, all the time.
We got another shift. Why are they so afraid? Have you ever noticed how scared police officers appear to be of Black people? In one of the videos that was shared, K-Cal rep says, Stanley said it was obvious that the officers were scared of him too, because I'm a big Black guy. He's quoted as saying, I have definitely been in interactions with police. They're pulling me over for whatever, and I can see the fear. And I'm like this little guy, I just can't understand. Once you got up on the vehicle and you saw me, like what is the fear? And I wonder if that always exists, regardless of who is being pulled over. But definitely, like in some of these in-person interactions, there's no car obstructing your view of the person. You can see how a person is being restrained, and to what degree they have any ability to move around. What is this level of fear that is so intense that a person must put their face on the concrete and hold it there without moving, and be perfectly still, even as you are, bodies piled on top of them? Like, what is it that makes them fear so much? I just always wonder.
For me, I think a lot of this stems from how Black people are portrayed in the media and in anything overall. Like they portray us as these aggressive and, just very combative and just unruly bunch of people, to the point where, because if you look at some of these videos in any situation where maybe a Black person is being pulled over, or they're going to arrest someone, it's like a gang of like 5 or 6 or 7 cars pull up, and they all jump out, like literally, like if this person's going to go wild and go crazy. And we've seen it on numerous occasions where that's not the case. The person's literally just standing there like, okay, I have my hands up, what's going on? And then they just, I don't know why is it at that moment they can't get it out of their head that, okay, this person's not being, aggressive or anything, we need to just calm down. It's like, let me take you down before you take me down. And I feel like a lot of it is just, it's part, I don't know what the training is, like what some police officers go through, what their training is like and what images they see. But I mean, I do feel like in some instances, some police officers may have had certain types of interactions with people of color, and are not able to separate that one situation and make it just that one thing, but instead they're bringing it over to the next one and the next one and the next one, and
That
just,
would be called racism. Sorry.
well,
I also think it could be an argument that you're not fit for the job.
well, that too.
But I definitely understand what you're saying about one interaction influencing others.
Mhm.
But to an extent, I don't even know if it's that they're afraid, or if it could be intimidation, or if it could be an internal hatred. I think that there are a lot of internal conversations that we're not having with how media portrays an image, and then you're not exposed to anything else. Areas
Yeah.
are not as diverse as we think. So if you've never seen a Black person or had an interaction with a Black person before, and you've only seen whatever Fox News source you're pulling from, then yes, you're afraid. I would be afraid. It's taking that further step to acknowledge the fact that media is fake, TV shows are not real, that news stories are only showing the extremes necessarily, and understanding that you probably have people in your family as well that have committed similar crimes, or people that look like you and commit similar crimes, and yet I don't look at that entire group of people and say, boom, this is your criminal mentality. It's the individual. I think we all need to work on seeing as an individual and not so much as a grouping. That could also go back to his hair. I mean, honestly, someone sees locks and there's the persona that flows with it. So you could argue that it's a lot of just what people are being exposed to and not what they're searching out for or educating themselves on.
Changing topic again. Investing for impact. What are the benefits when social service budgets are cut in favor of increased police funding? And this is sitting alongside two notions that apparently have been around for a really long time. Poverty is the parent of crime, said Aristotle, and Brian Stevenson says the opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice. So, if we understand this, if sociology understands that crime is an inherent outcome in impoverished environments, why put more emphasis on the law enforcement side of things instead of more preventative measures? I think is the question here.
I mean, personally, I think part of that, I'm not sure how big of a part, but if I had to take a guess, part of that is, it's the political game, right? I mean, because one thing that almost always, I mean, what it's the concept of nobody can disagree with safer neighborhoods, safer streets, safer, whatever, right? And so the best way to kind of signal that is, hey, let's put more money into policing, right? Even if it's more money than you would have spent on the social services. Whether or not that's the case, I'm not entirely sure. I don't study budgets, but I mean, if you want to make sure that nobody can attack you for being soft on crime, because that happened a lot, and still happens now, right? I mean, that's one of the biggest kind of selling points that people use, such and such is soft on crime, right? I mean, so then people, oh my God, people are gonna start breaking into my house now, So what's the best way to do that? Give them more money, No matter what the money pays for. Nobody cares what the money pays for. What we know now is that the police now have more money, which means that we have to be safer. And I would assume that's probably not the case.
That's a very tough one, and that's been I think the rhetoric for decades, and that's just the all-encompassing solution to the problem rather than addressing what we see are the symptoms of an impoverished community. And when things are cut, we have people, we have volunteers, we have professionals in all these different fields that from drug addiction to after school programs, all of these things that lift up a community and give people outlets that would in turn reduce crime. Cops are not seeing all of these symptoms and feeling that they need to respond to everything that's happening, and being the social workers and the school counselors and everything that they're being called on to do, that in many cases they're not equipped in all of the ways that they need to be effective responders to the different situations. And then brute force becomes, I think it seems to be that brute force is the way to go in different situations. And the younger they are, just, we're seeing a Black kid, we're seeing a Hispanic kid, Latino, and that's just how we're handling it. And now they're away. So what's the next problem that needs to be solved? And it's just, I think it just feeds the monster, and rather than solving a problem. So I don't know what the benefits are. I'd like to hear from probably from law enforcement how they see crime reducing when the social services are being cut and they're being called on to be every social service officer instead of a law enforcement, and handling other things in a non-brutal way. What are the benefits?
I can, it's Marcus here. I can somewhat speak to that. I saw a pretty interesting dialogue. It was put on by Vice and it was on YouTube. I can find the link and send it to you. But in the dialogue, it was a conversation between several law enforcement personnel from around the country. And one of the gentlemen was based out of Los Angeles. And he mentioned that they had a program. To where police officers were ingrained within the community. They had substations within the community, and they were there simply to just to listen to the community's needs. They weren't there to necessarily enforce or arrest anybody. They were just a presence. And he said that did wonders to kind of build the relationship and trust between the community and law enforcement, but that costed money. And he said, I think back in 2008, they cut funding. And so that program was one of the first to go. That was just an example that was mentioned there. Me personally, I don't necessarily agree with that. I feel like we can achieve the same result by law enforcement policing in the same cities in which they live in, because now they're ingrained within the community, and I feel like it does cost or take extra money to do that.
Okay, we have another topic change. And you know how Zoom covers your screen with all these things. I'm trying to see what it says here. Why do we see things so differently? There's a survey done by the Pew Research Center. Blacks are about that. The results of which suggest that blacks are about half as likely as whites to have a positive view of the job of their local that their local police are doing. When it comes to the idea that police are using the right amount of force for each situation, white people tend to overwhelmingly see it as such, that they're using the right amount of force, and black people see it a different way. And same thing when it comes to the idea that people are treated equally regardless of their race or ethnicity. And the numbers are pretty close, not pretty close to that other trend in terms of how people view officers being held accountable. I mean, I definitely found all this really interesting. It's just like how much more information is needed for this to be, for us all to see this more similarly. Just don't know.
I think it's also unfortunate that this information is not being spread. I mean, yes, the statistics exist, and once you actually look out for these things like black on black crime, and they can easily be debunked. It's just really about taking the time to Google something like that, and it's simply not happening. So I'd be interested in hearing how we could kind of fix that disconnect without someone like Travis and a police force or some broader scale kind of like backing these statistics to show what is actually happening in the community.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sentiment surveys are definitely important, and they help us to see, like, how we see things. But I always like to see actual facts, and there are a lot of facts that I don't know if we have some in this slide deck, but that show that it's pretty clear that Black people, Native American people, Hispanic people are treated differently by law enforcement, disproportionately so. And yeah, so those facts must not be getting out to enough people. It definitely isn't getting out at the rate at which, to Romuna's point, the media depictions of how, what criminals look like, and what violent people look like. That's for sure. Other thoughts on this?
I guess, I think that the easiest answer to this question would be, because I guess, all right, so it goes back to, for example, like this particular stop that this particular conversation is revolving around here. The police came out and said, well, what you didn't see was the moments before the actual video was recording. And so once that information gets out there, right, then that's where public sentiment starts to change, right? It starts to tick over, right? And so what my assumption is, or where I guess something that you could guess is that, well, when one side hears it, they say, oh, okay, well, that's why it escalated like that. But then the other side hears it and say, they hear that exact same thing and say, well, yeah, okay, but does that then give them the right to, for example, grab the man's hair, right? And I think, and I think that's where the disconnect comes. I'd be interested to see whether or not, to know whether or not, white, I guess white people are getting, that there's a lack of information, because I bet they see the same videos that everyone sees, right? I think it's about how it's digested and then how it's interpreted by the source, right? Whether or not like it's on a news program or it's coming from a program, that has more of a slant to it, right? They don't just state the facts; they put some editorializing on it, right? I mean, so I think that's kind of my thoughts on it.
I think the synthesis is definitely a part of it, but we do not have this. A lot of these videos are coming across, like when you want to see the full video, you're probably finding that on social media, whether it's YouTube or Twitter or IG, whatever it is. And our social media experience online is at least a tale of two cities, across the country. I can go to a lot of my white colleagues and say, hey, did you see this, that, and the other? And they're like, no, what are you talking about? Because our social media just look completely different. Sorry. Yeah, other people's thoughts. This is another survey result that, again, shows a difference in how we see things.
There's a strong belief that racism is a very fringe problem. It's not much of a problem in a lot of places. California is a diverse state, and there's, even just, Southern California for sure. And there's I've seen that their sentiment is, it's not really a problem. There's just a lot of there's some crazies, but they're very extreme, and they might be looking for the white hood. They might be looking for the swastika, but that's not how it is. There is racism in police departments as well. And it's very unfortunate when you hear the stories that the good cops, or the ones that are joined for for all the good reasons that we see that are portrayed in television and movies, and just trying to get the bad guy and put him away. There are ones that have, that when they have attempted to speak up or try to sway, someone that may be doing the wrong thing, that they're shut down, that they are fired, that they are bullied into go along to get along. And all of that bleeds into law enforcement. It bleeds into all of our politics, law, into every faction of a city's space, and that definitely is put onto the citizens. And we don't know what we're going to be encountering when we get pulled over, and if we're going to be on the wrong end of a racist encounter. And so I would hope that people can see a little bit deeper, that it's not going to be very overt and the police officer is wearing a uniform, but we don't know what his beliefs and practices may be outside of that when that badge comes off. But it is still for sure felt and seen in action in the streets and through these interactions. And we don't know what's behind it all the time, but that's definitely, it's not a fringe instances at all.
I'm not going to look at this as a change in topic, because it's one of these facts that show that Black people are 3 times more likely than whites to be killed by police, and 1.3 times more likely to be unarmed in those encounters. And as we know, place matters as well as race. Any other thoughts on this idea of like the way we're seeing this thing so differently, and why that might be, despite all the evidence to the contrary?
I don't know. I think it's hard to comment on someone choosing not to get educated.
That sounds like a comment.
That's about all I got.
There's a video of an encounter. It's at a gas station, and this white woman is being talked to by this cop, and the lady, she's clearly just overly irritated, and she's talking to the cop, and she puts her hand out at the cop and is like yelling at the cop, yelling at him. And she takes a step forward, cop takes a step back. And then it just kind of keeps going like that. And she starts to run at the cop with her hand out. And I swear about half of the parking lot, she's just chasing very aggressively at this cop. And all this cop is doing is just backpedaling. And you can't hear what he's saying to her because it's so far away, but you can tell he's like, lady, calm down. And then finally, about after 40 or 50 feet of her, or maybe more of her chasing this cop finally pulls out his taser, drops her.
Oh, a taser, right? That's nice.
Right, mm-hmm. And exactly, right. And so now, I'm just thinking to myself, well, if that had been just a Black woman, instead of a white woman, would that have ended the exact same way? You don't know for sure, but I think statistics, for example, like these, show you that there's three times more likely that she would have got shot instead of tased. Right.
It seems like when it comes to Black, whether it be Black women, Black men, or anyone of color, it seems like our interactions or anything negative that comes out of it is justified. Even though in that situation that you just mentioned, Stuart, it's like clearly none of us, and we know what we can just assume, like, oh my gosh, if that was a Black woman, oh my goodness, that would have never have gotten that far. Right. But it just seems like, and if you do just flip it and just take her out of that woman out of the equation and put a Black woman in that situation, after that, it would have definitely been, well, did you see what she was doing? Did you see how she had her hands in his face? Did you see what happened? Did you see all of this? Now with
did you know she had prior charges?
Yeah.
Right.
And now with
when
this
she
woman,
was 12.
I don't know, I didn't see the video. I mean, I just know based off of what you just said. And I guarantee you, let me not say guarantee, but it's from what we've seen recently, it'll stem from, well, she had mental illness. she had this, you know, she was maybe high or something like that. But for us, it just seems like there's just always this justification of why this could have happened. Did you see this? And it's like, for some reason, everyone sees it at that moment, but with other people, it's just always this cloud of, you know, question of why that happened.
Just before I switch topics, like I just got to say, have you all seen the video? It's old, where there's a white guy walking down the street with a machine gun, and everything is chill. You're not worried. And then the same machine gun, the same street, a black guy starts walking down that street. And really, people are staging. They just want to see what happens. And when the white guy's walking down, the cop walks over. Some cops come up and they ask him questions, and you know, he asserts his rights, and they let him go on. And I'm telling you, if you've seen that video, when I saw it, when the black guy came on the screen, my heart stopped. I was scared for what was going to happen. And sure enough, the police came over, and immediately they wanted him to get on the ground. And the people who were filming the thing, they came over and everything was good. But there's definitely, you know, there's a clearly the data shows there's a difference. We've seen enough to let us know there's a difference. My subconscious mind feels that difference, and it always boggles the mind when other people don't. Race color blindness. How does it feel when white people say, "Well, I just don't see color"?
That's always been a strange. I mean, when anyone says it, but you know, but I can't say I've ever heard anybody besides a white person say it. So yeah, I guess, yeah. I mean, but I think everyone sees color. Because we're hardwired as, you know, as humans to pick out differences, right? I mean, that's what kept us alive for so long in the bush, running around hunting stuff, right? I mean, if we needed to see something move that looked different from everything else, right? So that's one of the first things that we do, is see something that's different from what we are, something that we're, you know, maybe looking for consciously or not looking for subconsciously, right? So you absolutely do see it. It's about what you do with it, right? And maybe that's what they mean when they say I don't react to it. But if you take that statement on its face, you absolutely do see it. And so whenever I hear that, I just think that the fact that you felt the need to bring it up lets me know that you absolutely do see it. You know, and so I don't believe it personally whenever I hear it.
I've gotten this question, this statement before, like, oh, I don't see color, I treat everyone the same. My question back to them is usually, why don't you want to see my color? What is it about my color that you have to dismiss to put me on the same pedestal as you? You should be able to see my color, acknowledge our differences, and still treat you as an equal. I would. So the comment, I don't see color, it's simply not true. You go to the garden, you pick out the red flower because you don't like the color blue. So it's really that simple, as unless you're blind, I will give you that, or something along those lines where you see no color at all. I don't understand why when the conversation turns to race, all of a sudden we're colorblind, when I think that the color could be a beautiful thing.
I always wonder if what the person is saying is, well, the things I know about race is that people of different races are bad. There's something wrong with being this race or something wrong with being that race, and I don't want to see that. But if people saw like the value in our differences, then why, like, then that would, I just feel like it would be different. Like there would be this celebration of, oh, we have a unique perspective or a new perspective, or you know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you were gonna say something?
No, I was gonna say I agree. Like if you can't see color, then you can't see culture, and culture is a beautiful thing. Culture is I think it's what brings us together. It's what makes us different, and it's what gives us our identity. And if you can't acknowledge who I am as an individual, as a person, or you only want to partly acknowledge who I am as an individual or a person, and like Alexis said, dismiss, you know, the color of my skin and the culture in which I come from, you know, it's it's not a good feeling.
I can say that I think probably in the past I didn't take or have an issue with that phrase. You know, like, oh, okay, that's, you know, people use it as a, you like, no, I treat everybody equally, and I don't, you know, and I was probably most like, look at someone's character. I don't see that. So when you start to hear different perspectives, it's okay to shift in that way of thinking, because yeah, like Marcus said, that you're starting to erase the uniqueness of who people are, and when it comes down to it, that's really it's not the truth. We do see the differences, and it comes out in different ways. So just people, I think, as long as they expose themselves to a variety of people and backgrounds and cultures, you learn to appreciate them, and then you can see why that statement that you don't see color is problematic, and it can go into the way that you treat people. Because if you know, dismiss someone's culture because it's not like yours, or you're unfamiliar with it, you're being disrespectful to kind of a, you know, to someone that you may call your friend, and just say no, but that can lead into those other little phrases like, well, yeah, you're black, but you're like black, and, you know, but you're like, or I'm almost as dark as you because I got a tan. And it's just those little things like that goes along the same lines. And it's, if you're going to be that person and say that you don't see color, it just is a slippery slope. And it's just one of those phrases that just needs to go away. And you need to be able to see color, see the differences, see the uniqueness, and embrace those differences. There's no problem with that.
And I just want to acknowledge that, for any white people in the audience, whenever you are black and you occupy spaces that where you are, fundamentally one of a few, or maybe the only one, these are things that we absolutely hear, right? I mean, these aren't things that we're making up, and these aren't and it's not just like a one-off, right? These things consistently happen, which is why we can bring them back up, because more often than not, one-offs you tend to forget, right? But these things consistently happen, right? So in the future, when someone says to you, hey, X, Y, and Z happened, don't take it as okay, well, it was a one-off. Well, no, it probably has happened multiple times. This might be the first time you're hearing about it, but
it's happened enough where I'm bringing it up.
Exactly.
Right. Enough is enough. My
right.
goodness.
I mean, so and the thing, I mean, nobody's trying to be sensationalist. Nobody wants an argument, but it's just like hey, these are the things that are happening, right? I mean, so just keep that in mind whenever you see somebody on TV talking about it, and they might be way more angry than we are now sitting here talking about it, right? I mean, but take the emotion out and just and hear the words, and take the facts that are being provided, and see if you can filter through the anger and the emotional part of it. I mean, because that's just a person in a moment of time. So.
And I was gonna say, and then put the emotion back in, because you would reflect on like how much someone has heard this and how it makes them feel.
Absolutely.
How much of that person's being you are suggesting is irrelevant, or that you're choosing not to acknowledge. So we have a topic change. How do you feel when white people ask, because invariably this is the question that comes up when you have these kinds of conversations, and you finally, maybe you're on the verge of getting through to someone who hasn't seen it this way before, and now suddenly they get it and they ask, well, what should we do about it? Tell me what to do about this. Suddenly putting the full burden of 600-700 years of racism in the country, or whatever space you're in, on your shoulders, as if you are not at the bottom of on the bottom end of this oppression and couldn't possibly understand everything that's going on above and be able to dismantle it. How does that make you? Anyway, maybe I have sort of described in a sense how it makes me feel. How does it make you feel, Rowena?
For me, I'm not looking for anyone to, speak for a whole community or a whole bunch of people. I'm not looking for that. It's just, I'm looking for more, just acknowledge that there are inequalities, acknowledge that some people are treated differently, whether it be, you know, a Black person, Hispanic or whatever, or even, you know, as females, you know, just acknowledge that these things are happening and don't discredit it and make it seem like if we're just making this up. You know, I just, you know, just hearing someone say, well, what do you want me to do about it? It's like the same way we said, you know, when you see something, say something. I'm not saying to be, you know, go to someone and literally cause an argument or a confrontation, but it's just when you keep silent about certain things, the person who may be saying, or saying things that are racist or whatsoever, they'll look at you and say, well, well, she agrees with me because she didn't say anything. You know, it's just a matter of like, if you're amongst your friends or people who you consider to be your friends and you hear them saying something, say something, you know, that's not true, or I don't agree with that, or whatever. I mean, it's just when you sit there complacent and you just listen to these things and you don't comment or you don't say anything, it just gives that impression that, you know what, I feel like you agree with it. I just look at it from if you see or hear something, just say something. That's really what it is. And I'm not encouraging anyone to, you know, go and just cause a ruckus or anything like that. It's just in your own circles. If you hear about these things and you hear someone giving misinformation, correct it.
Yeah, I think there's 2 points. The first is, I, as an individual, cannot speak for a whole community. I can only speak for myself. And so, you know, when somebody does ask that question, the best thing that I like to tell them to do is just educate yourself. You know, read as many books, watch some documentaries, educate yourself. And then through that education, you know, they'll come to acknowledge or recognize that you have a privilege. And with that privilege comes a responsibility. And that responsibility is to try and not necessarily right the wrongs of the past, because, you know, that's not necessarily for you to do, but acknowledge the unfairness that exists, and, you know, do what you can to help create space and opportunity for the marginalized and disenfranchised communities.
What was that, Alexis? I thought you were.
No. I've actually never gotten the "what should we do about it" question directly. Luckily, I'm young enough where I'm 25. My white friends are protesting alongside next to me, so I've never had to really. I've never even thought about. I mean, Google it. What should I do about it? There's so much information in the world. Like I couldn't imagine getting that question. So.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten that before, you know, and just like Rowena said, the best thing that you can do as an individual is to check anybody who feels like they want to say that kind of stuff, assuming that you disagree with it, right? I mean, that you want to check whoever it is, be like, hey, you know, I don't play that, right? Because what you see is that, like for example, if you were having a conversation, let's say you were a history buff, right, and somebody came in and said something very incorrect about Alexander the Great, oh, you would jump in quickly. Hold on, no, it didn't go down like that, right? And so you would start spitting all kind of facts. Well, in this book, I read that, you know, back in, you know, I'm not even going to embarrass myself trying to talk about dates, but you would absolutely throw in every single fact, and you would, you know, argue to the death, and you would die on that hill. Now, nobody's asking you to die on any hills, but, you know, check somebody if they say something that's wholly untrue, or has the potential, or something that, you know, would upset somebody, would they be if they were in the presence of you all at that time, right?
Someone making a comment, because obviously that demographic is not represented in the room.
Right.
Absolutely. I would expect an ally to call that person out, say that is not acceptable. I'm not sure what you think this is, but I'm still going to acknowledge the fact that that comment is dated, historical, and should be honestly worked through with a therapist probably. But that's another.
I would expect anybody who disagrees with the comment, who finds a comment stereotyping or racist, to challenge it
Yeah.
without seeing themselves as allies. Just in the same sense, I think that you were saying, Stuart, that truth seekers, people who just believe in the truth. So we had a shift, and I do want to leave a little space for some discussion at the end for those who have time. Um, but I just three things I thought would be important. Um, People can always just do more of this. Just listen to other people's perspectives, and it is really rare. I've never actually seen a lot of opportunities where people of color get to share their perspective in a forum like this for others, even to just listen. So listening more, I think, is important. Learning more, right? Like Google it. There's so much out there. Um, but maybe don't learn on your own, because I have found that sometimes the questions that people who are not experiencing oppression will ask and explore are counterproductive and sometimes steeped in racism. Um, and change more, like decide that you're going to be different, do something different, um, and take action on that. So I do want to sort of open to comments if people have them. What I don't want to do is necessarily put any of the people who have been brave and decided to step up here and just share their perspectives on these challenging topics. I don't want to put anybody here under any kind of pressure or scrutiny to be questioned. But if someone has a comment or something they want to discuss or something that they have thought of, in the context of this conversation, please feel free to share, raise hands.
Let's see, is it, I'm not sure if he's an officer, but Officer
Oh yeah,
Travis,
right,
he's had his hand raised.
right. I'm trying to find.
I can open it up.
There we go.
Okay, you're open, Travis, for any commentary. Travis, are you able to speak? Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes, we can hear you.
Sorry about that. I'm having problems with my laptop, but I just raised my hand because I wanted everybody to know that we were here. Listening in, and you guys all have had great comments, and we're here to serve the community. You guys are all key components of the community here. So we know we can do better. We're always on the mindset of everything we do, how can we do it better next time? And so we look forward to working with groups like this to improve the policing here in Redlands. So if anybody has any questions regarding any of our policies, procedures, I can certainly answer those. And I want to thank you for allowing us to be here to make sure that you guys know what your local PD is doing.
I do have a question. If I could go back and find it, I know earlier you said that you have an employee that is working with you to help better serve the community. I was interested in if that employee was actually working there before or after the time of the incident, if that was your call to action where you hired this employee on and brought them on to better serve the community, or if that was something that had already been put in place.
No, that's been put in place now for about 1.5 years. We have an employee from the San Bernardino County Department of Behavioral Health, and it's more, like someone said earlier, everybody expects the police to solve their sociological problems, whether it be, hey, my kid's truant, or hey, there's homeless are hanging out in the park at Jenny Davis Park, right around the corner from you. There are other organizations that are out there that can probably do a better job at serving these people. And so we're always looking to partner with those. And we were able to obtain a grant that we were able to partner with the behavioral health, and they have helped us better serve those people and put them in touch with the resources that they need to succeed.
Okay. Along those lines, I know that you said that they are there in the office. I would love to know what that employee's impression of that interaction was, or how that was handled back in the office. If there's conversations that are had about different techniques that can be used. I know you said that you're working with different people to be called during different opportunities. So if a call does come in about some homeless people that are gathered and you recognize that a police force would probably be too much of a strong presence, are you deploying other people, or are you still taking that lead and initiative and showing up to these sites with someone else on hand, or is it just the police and then you're conversating once you get back?
We have a couple of community policing officers that work out of our department. The community policing officers are tasked with handling the calls and the issues that are kind of like a long-term problem for the community. And so the employee from the behavioral health works hand in hand with our community policing officers to get people housing, to get people the skill set that they need. So there is a lot of interaction. It's not like the employees just working out of our office and not working hand in hand with the PD, with the police officers.
So did that employee have any input on the situation that happened in Redlands that you could share?
I have not talked to her in the last week, but that's a good question. And when I see her,
at what point would she be involved then?
At what point would she be involved in
this? Well, I would expect that an interaction like this, especially if it sparked protests and everything, would kind of be her position to handle, right? I could be wrong. I guess I don't really get the full gist of what he does.
Because the protests are stemming from a traffic stop, and that person, the people that conducted the traffic stop were obviously two officers. And so this person is, the person that I'm referring to is a county employee, and their role is to help the people in our community who are in need, like the homeless, the drug people who are substance abuse, victims of domestic violence, people like that.
Okay, so that's not something that that traffic stop isn't really something that she would have reach on.
No.
Could that potentially change if you saw fit, if there was something that needs to be addressed in that area?
Yeah, I mean, if there was something that we saw that we could use her skill set on, we have. I will tell you, we work very closely with people from the different local colleges and universities, and we are trying to. We have arranged. I shouldn't say we, but we've connected leadership from the BLM side with the leadership from the Tea Party side, which was the counter protesters from last week, and we have a professor mediating a meeting between all three. So in hopes that we can start building some understanding amongst the two groups. If any of you were at the protests last Tuesday, there were some words that were said that were just despicable. You would think that we were back in the 50s or the 60s. Just blatant racism, that was coming from people's mouths. And, as somebody that's lived here in Redlands all my life, that's disappointing. And I feel that we can be part of, if there's a way that we can coordinate some type of interaction between the different groups with a mediator, and the mediator is actually a race and ethnic relations professor, has been in the community for some time now, and we have worked with him on the past, setting up like hate crime, a town hall meeting discussing hate crimes. We're just hoping that, at this point, he's somewhat successful on getting the groups together and maybe developing some type of understanding of each culture, so that some of this rhetoric that we heard last Tuesday can be eliminated.
When I hear about things that people say that are racist, I I get why people would focus a lot on the words in the moment and how people feel. But the reality is, for those words to exist in in a person's heart and mind in Redlands, that means that there is likely that's coming from somewhere, and that's that's um that's festering in a space, and so that exists in Redlands. And so somewhere in Redlands there are people who think and feel this way. And if I was a person who lived in Redlands, like when I went to school in a community where there were words said like that, um, it was clear to me that it wasn't just about the words being said. It was also about the actions that people can take to impact other people's lives. It was also about, being a kid going to school with other kids whose parents have those kinds of thoughts and ideas. So while, it's certainly interesting to think of Black Lives Matter and the Tea Party and, these people coming together at a table. Um, I would caution folks to always think about the systemic impact from an individual, from an individual who has these thoughts and ideas. Where does this person work? Who does this person influence? Does this person have kids? Because it becomes it's the reality is it's always bigger than that one statement because that's come from someplace, and in the other spaces where that person might operate, where they don't necessarily say those things, or where they or their friends or whoever, they don't necessarily say those things, they might take actions that align with those ideas to have a negative impact on people's lives. I went to school where the principal would use the N word in a middle school, and his actions lined up with that. He always punished Black and Hispanic kids 10 times worse than he would a white student, and it was something that people knew. In the neighborhood, there would be the neighbor who would say, those kinds of words, and some of those neighbors were store owners, and that meant that if you were a Black kid and you tried to go into their store, you would have a different experience from the white kids, right? So I would caution you all to think about that isn't what we're dealing with isn't just one person having one comment or a set of comments, but a set of people in the moment feeling so empowered to express their thoughts and views that they've otherwise shared in private or with smaller groups of people, and that they've maybe acted on in ways where they have had influence.
Hey, Travis, you mind? I got a good question for you. You said that you grew up in Redlands and and that's your community, and it sounds like you love it there. You got a passion for it. I mean, obviously, you became an officer to help protect it. Were you surprised though? You said that you were appalled, but were you surprised?
So going back on what Clinton just said,
Okay, all right.
I'm not really surprised because just in the last 4 weeks, to my knowledge alone, we've had 2 calls that were just based on racist views. And I'll give you an example of one that just occurred last week, right before the day before it was last Monday, the day before the rally or the demonstration was going to take place at Ed Hales Park. Someone called up and said, hey, there's 3 Black gentlemen in Ed Hales Park. They appear to be, they didn't use the word gentleman, but there were 3 Black males. They were in Ed Hales Park, and they appear to be Antifa or BLM. And it appears like they're scouting out and casing the area to set up for something, the next day. So I go out there myself. I make contact with these 3 young men. It turns out that they were just finished cleaning the windows of Emerson's jewelry store, and that their car broke down, and they were trying to figure out how they're going to get their pressure washer and their ladder up to Sonora, because it's already like 105 degrees outside, and I was like, hey, throw the stuff in the back of my car. Well, I'll give you, I have room to take one of you guys up there. We'll drop you off, and then you guys can figure it out. And it just, when you get calls like that, and it's so rooted in blatant, the only reason they're saying this is because of the color of their skin. I made it a point to contact that RP and say, hey, you know what? These people were actually, you know, just trying to make a buck cleaning windows for a local business.
What is RP?
Reporting party, I'm sorry. The person
Okay,
that,
so
the
when
person,
that happens, and I just have like a quick comment, because had that interaction, had they not met an officer like you who was understanding and able to come into the situation with a cool level head, and they met someone who perhaps was a little less familiar with the community and did not grow up in Redlands and was more intimidated by Black faces, that could have potentially ended with their lives being taken. So my return question would be, what was the RP's, where was the justice in that situation for those 3 boys? What was that person charged with for wasting police resources, for falsifying reports, most likely, because it sounds like they weren't actually doing anything but minding their own business. I would love to know what they are then charged with to prevent that from happening further, because I can't see anything else preventing another call when another 3 faces show up. So,
well, so in order to do filing a false police report, we have to prove that they knowingly filed a false police report. In this case, you know, that's not going to happen. But you know, I made it a point talking to the witnesses, like, you know, basically when you called us and you said this, you're basing this on the color of their skin, and it's just, I would like to think I've made him feel, you know, that he was in the wrong. I don't know if that got through. I don't know this person, so I don't know if that got through to them. You know, but I guess I was condescending when I talked to him. So I would hope that you know, he gets the point. He gets the point. Like, hey, don't be calling us to you know, we're only responding to crime. I mean, we've had like another call that we had was at a local shopping center where somebody called to say, hey, there's more drug dealing going on here because we've seen more Black people in the shopping center hanging out. And I basically told this person, we're not going to respond to that call, because tell me why you think these people are selling drugs other than the fact that they're Black. And he couldn't tell me that. And I told him, I was like, we're not an arm of, you know, for people to exercise their racist views. And so we give our watch commanders complete freedom and discretion to respond to calls as they see fit. You know, if it's anything rooted in any type of racism, I would expect our watch commanders to be weeding that out. And if people don't agree with it, I've instructed them to forward them up to the commander or myself, and we'll handle dealing with them and explain to them why we're not responding to a call like that. You know,
can I comment back to the other, before we get too far away? I'd hate to lose the momentum of where we were at. I know that you said that he referred to the 3 Black men as not men. I'm assuming that that is a word that you're not wanting to repeat for obvious reasons. It's probably something that's very demeaning, derogatory. And if that is rooted in racism itself, I would love to know what more would be needed to justify a false police report that was obviously based on something other than a concern of safety.
Or so maybe other kind of charge or something.
Yeah,
you
if
know?
there's anything
kind of
that can, anything to hold them accountable, honestly.
So let me back up. Maybe there's a little miscommunication here. It was basic. They didn't refer to use any derogatory names. It was 3 Black males or three. They didn't use any derogatory names to identify them. I think when I said gentlemen, I said that's not what the guy said. I was calling them gentlemen when.
Okay, that gives the impression of a much negative tone. So I didn't really see what you were. Okay.
So, where were we going? Where was I going with this?
Any sort of repercussions for someone filing a report off of someone's race?
So filing a false police report is more like, okay, hey, let's see, like, okay, I'm a victim of a burglary. Someone came in and broke into my house when, in essence, you know, I held a party and, you know, and some stuff was stolen, and I didn't want my parents to know that I held a party. So that's filing that's knowingly in basically making up a lie that I'm filing a false police report. When someone says something, and this is a conversation I had with a couple people in our city. You know, the city's slogan is "See something, say something," and you know, maybe we need to revisit that slogan, because sometimes just because somebody sees something, we encourage right now, we're encouraging everybody, hey, if you see something, say something. But sometimes maybe that slogan needs to be modified, because maybe different segments of our community are being called out when they shouldn't be being called out.
Yeah, I feel like if I'm, thinking back to 9/11, when that
Yes.
phrase was being, generated,
Mhm.
and it was a lot of it ended up being, oh, I see a person who looks like a certain ethnic group,
Mhm.
and therefore I'm going to say something. It definitely feels like it's really broad.
Yeah, and so
I think that's an important thing to think about, like changing, like what is the mission behind, or the vision or values behind that statement, and maybe being more explicit.
exactly, Clinton. And you know, and I don't know if everybody on this call is from Redlands or is ties to the Redlands community, but you know, we want and cherish your guys' opinion. And so one of the reasons why we're on this call is that hopefully we can somehow figure out a way where we can get people like you guys involved in some of the decisions, you know, whether in the city, you know, and get your input. So hopefully something positive that can lead out of this.
Yeah, I definitely would like to see how we can, help to facilitate some conversations. I wanna give Mary Ann a chance to ask a question. She's had her hand raised for a while.
Hi, thank you. And thank you everyone first, the panelists for setting this up and for being so open. I really appreciate it. This is a good opportunity, very welcome. Look forward to more. And also my question is really for the Assistant Chief. Thank you again also for attending and speaking. I'm curious, continuing the topic we've been on about trying to figure out how to set up some kind of accountability, or at least identify these patterns in our community. And I am a Redlands resident as well. Yeah, I would guess that you have other situations that are kind of comparable to this. You probably are aware of certain members of the community who frequently do unusual things or have patterns of behavior. Like maybe some lady always thinks there's a prowler in her backyard, but you know it's her sprinklers and she just never remembers. Like, I would guess that you and your team are witness to lots of patterns of behavior that maybe you don't really reach crime or anything, but maybe you're aware. I wonder if you can think of any scenarios that are kind of comparable, where at the very least we would have some mechanism for you to identify a specific individual that repeatedly is making calls based on someone's age, or sorry, I don't know why I said age. I mean, maybe that's an issue too, no disrespect, but someone's race or gender or the way they look or something. Does that?
So we track all the calls for service that come in, and if somebody's calling more than others, you know, and it doesn't seem like there's any merit, that's where our community policing officers get involved. And unfortunately, there's several people with mental issues here in our community, and the calls we get are just baffling. And we try to work with them to get them help from like family members, or try to alleviate some of the burden that they're putting on us. But we also have to be careful. I will give you an example. Years ago, a lady, let me tell the whole story, because before you make any judgment here, but a lady called us, and she was living at a house, and in her backyard, she had a tendency to, instead of putting her undergarments in the dryer, she would hang them up on the clothesline. And so she kept calling us, telling us that somebody was stealing her underwear from the clothesline. And I will have to tell you, I was like, okay, lady, you're crazy. This is not happening. Okay, and we ended up putting up a camera, and sure as heck, we catch a guy jumping the fence, grabbing her underwear and taking off. And ultimately when we tracked him down, we served a search warrant, and, you know, he has all these undergarments in his house. You know, so I guess the point of my story is that crazy things do happen, and there are crazy people out there, but there are a lot of cases where they're calling needlessly, but they're also, we have to be open, because there are those cases where yeah, you know, you're where we think you're crazy and actually it's true. You know,
Yeah.
another example is up at the cemetery a couple of years ago. These group of moms came to the city and said, hey, all these, you know, these little knickknacks that we're putting out at the gravesite are being stolen. And I have to tell you, I was like, no one's stealing your, you know, your 99-cent Hello Kitty purse that you put out at the gravesite. And so we ended up working with one of the moms and putting a tracker in a Hello Kitty purse. And we caught these two girls, 21 years old, from Banning, that were coming here and stealing all this stuff from the grave sites to sell at a yard sale, you know. And so we have to be open, you know, minded. And
Yeah,
so,
I appreciate that perspective and the challenge that you and your team face trying to make these distinctions. In this particular case, would you consider, with the circumstance you described where your team was called in for what turned out to be a very innocuous situation, would you consider that a situation where your community policing officers might get involved and follow up and have a record of having followed up with that individual? I know you said you're condescending, and that does offer me some gratification, but from more of a policy perspective and documentation perspective, is that a scenario where you might consider expanding the community policing effort to kind of document that, yes, we visited this individual for suspected erroneous racial profiling call? Is that something that could be in the cards?
So probably not, just because they're so busy doing other things. But what I will tell you is every call goes into our computer data system. And so now when that person calls, it's flagged, okay, hey, he called on whatever the date was, you know, July, whatever, 23rd. And all the comments are in there, and we can see right through that, you know, in terms of, you know, okay, hey, this guy called before based on basically racist, you know, thoughts. You know, so we have that record in our computer system.
And is that something we establish statistics for, or can make available? Is your team analyzing that kind of data and into information that then informs future policy decisions and forums? Or is it something you'd consider?
You know, that's something that we'd have to consider, because right now we are not tracking like erroneous calls or what you're describing. And I hope I'm not miscommunicating this. This isn't happening like on a daily basis. But, you know, just in the last month, it's happened twice that I know of.
Yeah.
So which is too many times. You know, so you know, that's something that you know, there's so much data that we have to track, and we'd have to be able to figure out how to put that into our computer system where we're able to track that actual component, you know.
Right. Thank you so much for your time, and panelists, again, thank you, and thanks for giving me a chance to speak. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for
Yeah, thanks for
your
your
input,
questions.
Marion.
Yeah, definitely.
Officer Travis, I'd like to know if you'd be able to tell us what information, or when it comes to policy and procedures, or is happening when it comes to identifying, weeding out, weeding out officers who do and or may have ties to white supremacist groups, and all the types of, you know, whether if it's someone's being reported, if they're in a Facebook group, is any of that kind of tracking being done, or social media accounts followed, tracked, or what's the policy on participation in these groups? You know, when they're off the clock, what standard are they being held up to?
Okay, so you have a couple quick different questions in there. So first off, when we hire somebody, we go through all their social media. We do a very detailed background investigation. Doesn't mean that someone can't slip through the cracks. We actually had someone, we hired somebody it was about 2 years ago. And this was a person that was a police officer at another agency. About 5 months into him working here, we discovered that he was not honest with us during the application process, and that he had been affiliated with a gang here based out of Redlands. We immediately terminated him because he was on probation. Going back, we have policies for conduct. If they are, you may have seen an article in the LA Times this morning talking about officers, and I think they paid out $55 million in the last 10 years due to officers being in these cliques, in these what they've called basically what they are gangs within the police department, and so we have strict policies against anything like that. If something was that was to come to our attention, we immediately open up an internal investigation on it and take appropriate action, which could be lead up to termination. We have a duty. We have to we police the Redlands community, and we have to do it in a fair and an impartial manner. We have to do it with caring. We have to do it with empathy. We have to, there's times that we have to put hands on. If you would have told me, 5 years ago that 2 terrorists would have been living here in Redlands, and we're going to kill, 14 people out in San Bernardino, I would have told you, you know what, you're crazy. The terrorists wouldn't be living here in Redlands, but they were living within a quarter mile of Esri. That's just, I don't think any of us could have fathomed that. So we have to be prepared, we have to be ready, but at the same time, we have to police in a manner that our community expects, and I'm always under the belief that we can do things better. I played sports coming through Redlands, and there's always someone bigger, faster, stronger than you, and you just always got to be working at getting better. And that's something that that's a culture that we have here at the police department. And we've learned some stuff over the last couple weeks, and I'm hoping that we can implement some changes. And but we also want to be connected with all these different groups. I've spoken to probably about 15 groups now, including the Next Gen United group, NAACP out of San Bernardino, several different churches here in town. People like yourselves, you guys are part of the solution, and we need to recruit, and we need to hire people that make up our community. Because, if I live here in this community, and I'm going to treat people with respect, when you're playing in between the whistles, but when the whistle blows, I'm going to be treating that person with respect, because, this is, I'm a father here, I'm a coach here, I'm a mentor here, and so that's what we're always looking for when we're doing the hiring, is people that just have that connection here to Redlands.
Yeah, Travis, I have a quick question just in regards to that. You bring up a good point in that it's important to, hire people who represent the community. I know, for the Black community, a lot of times we face the barrier of having, criminal past or criminal record. And a lot of times that kind of removes us from the hiring pool, so to speak. Are there any programs or any hiring policies to kind of address that?
So that's a good question. We look at the time. Now, if you just were arrested last month or last year, and you wanted to become, and let me again phrase, it depends on what the type of arrest is for, Right. But if you want to become law enforcement, maybe there's a little bit more time. But if it was like 10, 15 years ago and there was, some minor hiccup or, and it's an arrest that will, take, for example, marijuana. Marijuana is legal now, and so, there's been some time we've overlooked, I shouldn't say overlooked, but we've taken that into account when we make our decisions. Just today, we were able to announce that we brought on a gentleman here younger man. I think he's 19. He's from the Redlands community. He was homeless at one time. He's a good kid, working his way. He has goals. He eventually wants to be a police officer, but he's also Black. You know, and we've recruited him, we've mentored him through this time. And I would tell you, I mean, this guy has perseverance, and he knows how to be. He's resilient, and you know, who's better to when we're dealing with homeless people? Who, you know, he has that perspective. You know, he just needs. You know, I grew up on Lawn and Brockton, right across the street from the projects, and I had, you know, what I had going for me was I had parents that were involved in my life, and I had teachers and coaches that really instilled stuff. And that's what, you know, we owe it to our, you know, that generation coming up. And, you know, I just spoke with the Next Gen United, and I have to say, I am very impressed with these people. You know, our future is bright when you sit down and you talk to them, and you hear what they have to say, and their thoughts, and their reasonableness. You know, too many times older generations, you know, talk smack about the younger generations. It happened with me, you know, and that's something I never want to catch myself doing, because, I mean, you know, there's a lot to offer. This generation coming up has a lot to offer, and we need to embrace that.
Yeah.
There was just one quick question from Molly Green. If the meeting with the professor with Black Lives Matter and the Tea Party groups, if that was going to be shared or broadcast on any platforms?
As of now, you know, you six, I see 6 people on here. So you 6 are really the only people that know about it, outside of what we're doing. You know, we're trying to take, when I say we, the PD is trying to take a backseat of this, because we don't, you know, we certainly don't want to influence one side or another on this. And the professors that's doing this, I mean, he has his work cut out for him, just because, you know, of the circumstances. But no, at some point, hopefully, maybe this could be a model for communities to follow. Hopefully we are able to share something. Hopefully it's successful. You know, we're in the infancy stages. Everybody has agreed to meet. Where the professor is going to do one-on-ones first before bringing everybody together, so that he can get a perspective of where, you know, what to try to accomplish. And so we can just keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully at some point we are able to go public with this, you know, to the extent that we can. And maybe, who knows, I'll like I told the professor, I was like, hey, if all I know is if we don't do anything, nothing's going to happen. You know, I mean, all we can do is try, you know, so, and maybe, and who knows, maybe we can bring in somebody from this group to as it expands, you know, I don't know.
You know, I would say, just, you know, as we finish up here, I would say do the best you can to try to document this entire process. So if the professor and all the groups will be up for it, I say document it from the one-on-one meetings all the way through to the big meetings. Because if you want to make this an actual something for other people to follow,
Other departments to use, yeah.
then you absolutely have to document it, you know, with cameras that, I mean, that you could then, you know, condense down into like maybe a short documentary piece. I mean, I'm not sure if you guys have that kind of expertise on hand. I mean, but documenting it so people can see it in its most raw form, from the, you know, from those one-on-one kind of smoothing of the edges on through to the final product. I think it could be very beneficial to see how things like this come together, and then maybe do some postmortems after the fact.
I have a feeling he's going to get some of his students involved, and so hopefully they can do that. I mean, we as a PD just don't have the resources, like I mentioned.
Absolutely.
31 positions cut, and we have so many criminal problems that we're dealing with. But this is important, you know. So we're trying to spend a lot of resource, you know, some of our time, you know, addressing these different groups and being part of these different groups to help mend the fences here, because there, you know, it is sad to see. People just the way people are acting nowadays. It's just sad to see. You know, there's some very racist stuff that was said the other night at a protest, and hopefully we can change that, because, you know, just I've always said, any type of hate crime, you know, no one should be ever be victimized based on their religion, sexual orientation, color of their skin. We throw all of our resources at that. We've solved 67 out of our last 68 murders, and we treat a hate crime just like a murder, and we'll leave no stone unturned, because that is, it is just, you know, it's just wrong, you know. So that's our thoughts. But yeah, in terms of documenting it, I'm hoping that eventually, you know, right now, unfortunately, everything's going to be over Zoom, it sounds like, and that might be an easier way to capture stuff. So
Yeah, I will say that any effort to address racial equity begins and continues with really with community engagement, and a part of that engagement is, you know, what you keep talking about, engaging your partners and leveraging partners to help address the challenge along with you, and take on the parts of it that they can take on best. And you know, I'm eager to see how NorthStar can be a partner with the Redlands PD to try to help us all address, you know, issues of racial inequity in any way we can. But I do want to wrap. I appreciate everybody who stayed the extra 36 minutes, who came, you know, to begin with, to take part in this experience, and we definitely want to figure out how we can be a platform for engagement between the Redlands PD and the Esri Redlands GIS community. So Travis will reach out, you know, after this, and figure out, you know, what next steps can be.
well,
Anyway, with that,
thank you for having us, and look forward to working with the group in the future.
appreciate it.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Travis.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you
All right,
all.
thank you, Quinn.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Bye.